One of the best ways these days to get noticed or get picked as a freelancer is, I found my calling because I'm not even such an avid IPL watcher, but I know that's why people are engaging with freelancers, and it's honestly a win-win.
Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast series. Today we're thrilled to have Vitasta Kaul join us, who is a master brand strategist and an accomplished storyteller with over 17 years of experience. She's played a pivotal role in shaping the identities and success of early stage and emerging brands across B2C, D2C, as well as retail sectors. She's also recognized as one of the top 10 marketing leaders in Asia. Let's dive into her insights and experiences that have marked her as a leader in the world of marketing. Hi Vitasta, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm really good, Tanya. Thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to come and do this podcast with you.
So, what prompted you to tell yes to us for joining us on this podcast?
So a couple of things actually. I think you and I met at one of the events that you were hosting a few weeks back, and I remember the energy and the vibe was very interesting. And when you came to me and you said that you had a podcast that you guys wanted to create and you wanted to build content around the community, I thought it was a great idea because I think communities thrive on stories, and when there are people coming and endorsing, outsized or coming and advocating freelance working, gig working. I think it's a great story to put out, and it also brings more people. It encourages more people to come join the community, work with you guys. So I think why not, like let's encourage more people to become a part of this.
Yeah, and also I feel like because you're a marketing professional yourself, you actually understood, okay, she's doing this because, this is something that's up and running today in the marketing world, running podcasts, sharing snippets of it, be on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I felt like you just understood it the moment I pitched it to you. So it was very easy to, convince you to be a part of our podcast. So that was amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I have looked into your LinkedIn, so I know who you are. For our audience, could you please give a brief detail as to what your profession is, what your industry is, and for how long did you work as an independent consultant?
Okay, so I basically call myself a brand strategist, a storyteller. I've been working for close to 17 years, but I think my journey of telling stories or writing or just being creative started long back. I think when I was in school and through college, because I was always interested and I was always intrigued by writing, performing arts, movies, music, that kind of stuff always, intrigued me. It was very exciting. कि कैसे करते हैं लोग, कैसे बनता है, like two people falling in love, stories, movies, everything was really magical around that, right? And I thought, so I actually graduated in a course called BMM, which is Bachelor's in Mass Media from Mumbai University, and we had a lot of interesting, subjects which were part of the curriculum that focused on creative writing, that focused on storytelling, that focused on branding. And I genuinely felt that, I had found my calling because till the 12th I was doing science and I was not very happy. But the moment I shifted gears and I said, okay, let's try something creative. Let's move into this direction and see कि क्या होता है. I thought I found my calling. And uske baad se, I've been working for 17 years. Back in college also, I used to do a lot of writing for, these small journals. We used to have something called JLT and Jam. These were magazines that were out for teenagers and, young college students. And we used to do a lot of content writing. We used to contribute articles and stuff. So tab se maza aata tha. So when I graduated, like every other kid at that point of time, I started preparing for CAT.
Okay.
No, for CAT. And I realized I was miserable for 6 months. And I decided कि चलो कुछ काम करते हैं. And I joined an interesting organization at that point of time, which was to EdTech. So parallel co-curricular learning and stuff, very interesting. And I joined them as a content writer. And it was wild because we used to do a lot of curriculum writing, but in comic book format or in animation format and stuff like that. So since then, it's been 17 years, I've always worked with startups. So it started with me being a content writer, where there was a lot of storytelling happening, with obviously a purpose of educating kids. But then I shifted gears. I then upskilled a little bit. Then I did a program, a one-year program from IIM Calcutta. And then I shifted gears. I was an entrepreneur for 2 years. We sold that business. I freelanced and consulted for about a year and a half. And after that, I joined another startup, which was in the used two-wheeler space, another Bombay, Bangalore-based startup. And I worked with them for about 8 years. And after that, now I'm just chilling and I'm just doing my own thing. I'm doing a couple of projects on the side. I recently did another upskilling program. So yeah, it's just been that. Like that's been my journey. So I've mainly worked with startups. I love working with startups in the 0 to 1 and 1 to 10 journey, because I think that's where the earlier you start with your brand building and your storytelling activity, I feel the more you connect with your consumers, the faster you're able to generate recall in their minds. If you've already scaled and then you start doing that, then it's a very expensive affair, and फिर उतना फर्क भी नहीं पड़ता because someone else has already done it better than you.
Correct. Okay.
So I think that 0 to 1, 1 to 10 journey is very important, and usually I come in there. That's been my expertise so far.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to continue doing that for other brands. Hello, call me.
So you've mentioned storytelling and love stories when you were answering the question.
Yeah.
Are you a Bollywood fan?
Oh yeah, massive. Like
lovely.
all the rickshaw songs and chapri songs, like I know them all.
Okay.
Yeah, some of my friends hate me for it, but
why do they hate you for it?
I don't know. Maybe I just don't fit into their template of cool or whatever.
Probably, yes. So I'm a huge Bollywood buff, so I
Yeah.
completely understand. So for me also, I resonate with so much of what you said because similar to you, I didn't know what to do after graduation. Creative kid, so I was like, let me give marketing a shot, and fortunately I found my calling here. What intrigues you about working for startups?
What intrigues me is that honestly a lot of startup founders, and nothing against them, but they're all young, so they understand certain things really well. They understand business really well. They understand operations really well. They understand finance really well. They understand numbers really well. तो उनको सब समझ में आता है कि धंधा चलता कैसे है. But I feel like there is a gap. They understand the mechanics of marketing really well. Like SEO, SEM, digital, numbers, numerical analysis, वो सब समझ में आता है.
Everything that has a KPI attached
Everything that has a tangible KPI or a number attached to it, I think people understand that fantastically, and they not only understand it, sometimes I feel like some people understand it better than me also, and there's no harm in admitting that. But they don't understand what it takes to reach that KPI. There is something that happens in the back end, and what really happens in the back end is कि आप अपने customer को जब reach out कर रहे हो, then what is that connect, or what is that thing that brings you and the customer together, or rather what is it that brings the customer back to you again and again and again. So how do you create that? So that could be something very basic. That could be a feature or a value proposition, or it could just be how good your product is, or the fact that your product is made using, ethically sourced community products. I don't know what that is. That could be a different thing for every brand, but वो figure out करना बहुत ज़रूरी है. और मेरे को लगता है कि जब startups का जो शुरुआत का जो period होता है ना, people are so focused on numbers, KPI, raising the next round of money, getting in the revenue, becoming operationally profitable, becoming net profitable. वो पूरे उसमें ना ये लोग भूल जाते हैं that how do we create an identity for the brand? How do we create an identity for the founders of the brand? Because it's also important. Like for example, today an Ola is synonymous with a Bhavish Agarwal, right? People see the two synonymously. So when Bhavish is talking on LinkedIn or any other platform, people are constantly relating that his attributes to the attributes of Ola, whether good or bad, and it rubs off both ways, right? So that's how they need to understand at that stage, numbers और पैसे के साथ साथ ये establish करना भी बहुत ज़रूरी है कि what does your brand stand for? Why are people buying from you? Why are people associating with you? That's also really, really important.
Okay.
And I think that's what attracts me, because it's a blank canvas. They don't come with any preconceived notions. या brand की कोई prior identity नहीं है. It's not a legacy brand. We have to wipe off this, then we have to recreate this. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. So it's very interesting because there's so much freedom. It's like a completely open meadow and you can do whatever you want. So that's what really excites me, the autonomy, the freedom that comes with it. Yeah.
So do you have this one brand that you really admire them for their storytelling?
Oh, I love the work that Zomato does on social
yes.
media. It's just, to show you a slight transition. Like I'm a 90s kid, right? और 90s में जो storytelling होती थी ना, वो बहुत, so just I'm getting a little technical over here. There's something called latitudinal and longitudinal studies in marketing. Okay, so longitudinal is when, let's say, I pick you as a subject and I study your consumption patterns from childhood till you become, let's say, 30, 40, 50 years old. And latitudinal होता है कि let's say I say कि मेरे को सबका brushing, I want to see how people brush their teeth, but I study that across a spectrum of age group for a short period of time, let's say 3 months, 6 months. So पहले क्या होता था कि ये सारी studies होती थी, उसके basis पे brands used to say, oh, these are the consumption patterns, women in the household who are using detergents think like this, so therefore this needs to be my story. There was a lot of thought, and they used to invest a lot of money, and then those ads or those campaigns used to run for a really long period of time. So there was a very good recall attached to it, like a Nirma or a Surf or whatever, if you recall some of the ads.
Even the jingles that they had.
The jingles. But आज की डेट में क्या हो गया है कि लोगों का, people are so fleeting and people need that instant gratification, right? So moment marketing has become a very big thing. कि कुछ भी हुआ, चलो विराट ने सेंचुरी मारी तो उसको पकड़ लेते हैं और फिर सोशल मीडिया पे कुछ तो करते हैं, मचाते हैं. या Zomato and Blinkit keep doing these
notifications.
Yeah. Also the face-offs that they keep doing with those hoardings.
Billboards.
The billboards. So that is very interesting because that again is storytelling, but the context has completely changed.
Correct.
The format has completely changed because your audience has completely changed, right?
Yeah.
So I love Zomato. I love the work that they are doing.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And of late, Zepto has also really upped their game. If you see some of their new creators, especially on LinkedIn and all, I've seen them creating these LinkedIn profiles for different kind of product categories, and it's very interesting. Like if you get
they've made LinkedIn profiles.
Yeah, so they made LinkedIn profile for, let's say, a soda or like जो भी आप पार्टी स्नैक्स ऑर्डर करते हो या जोमेटो से आप जो भी प्रोडक्ट्स रेगुलरली ऑर्डर करते हो ना, तो उनके लिंक्डइन प्रोफाइल्स उन्होंने बनाए हैं.
Oh wow.
They're actually social media posts only. They're mock-ups.
Okay, yeah.
But very interesting. Very interestingly done. So I felt कि यार ये तो बहुत बढ़िया है. ऐसा कुछ करना चाहिए. Why didn't someone think of this before?
Yeah. So, but I feel like Zomato did pave the path for other brands to be like, okay, this is something you can actually do and not be very serious with your marketing game.
Yeah, and why be so serious? क्यों? मतलब.
Yeah.
Unless you're a brand that's, like an insurance brand or a pharma brand or a brand that really needs to talk and be serious, you can't be frivolous. Wherever you have the room, be funky, be frivolous, be wacky. Sometimes it'll backfire, but ठीक है. People's memory is very fickle. Now, 3 दिन में लोग भूल जाते हैं.
Yeah. Okay, now pivoting back to what we are set to talk about, you did mention a short stint of you freelancing, independent consulting. Why did you want to, first of all, start freelancing, and was the transition to freelancing challenging?
So I'll answer that question in 2 parts. So my first stint with freelancing was back in 2013-14. That time, honestly, I was transitioning. मुझे पता नहीं था कि मुझे करना क्या है, because I'd been working with a startup for close to 6 years in the edtech space. I'd been doing a lot of content creation, but at some point I felt कि okay, what next? I want to elevate what I'm doing. I want to move into something more interesting. तो उस टाइम मुझे पता नहीं था. So that time the transition was not so challenging because I actually went back and consulted with one of my co-founders because he was starting something new. So he said, hey, why don't you come and why don't you do a little stint with us? And I said, okay, fine, okay. I didn't think too seriously about it because at that point of time, I was working on an independent venture of my own. And because that was the early stages, I was like, okay, this will be a good way to kind of bring in some extra money and also sustain that so I can do both. So that was my actual objective at that point of time. But I realized it's a whole lot of fun for 2 reasons. A, because you meet a lot of interesting people, which you would not normally meet in your day-to-day life, from different fields. So that company was actually into turnkey solutions for office spaces. And at that point of time, a lot of startups were getting funded left, right, and center. So I had the good fortune of meeting a lot of interesting founders of those startups because we were pitching turnkey office interior
Okay.
solutions to them, because they all had raised money, so they were all making new offices in the Powai area. So that was very interesting. वहाँ बहुत सारे लोगों से मिलने को मिला. So my next stint, which was with Credar, it kind of generated from these interactions only, these founder interactions that had happened. So yeah, you never know ना कि कहाँ से क्या निकल के आएगा. So always so that was very interesting. The second reason why I think freelancing, I was like, I want to do it because like I told you, I was a little confused and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I thought, let me do 4 or 5 things and let me see what I like. So before I commit to something full time and I realize in 6 months that I'm not enjoying it, maybe this is a good way to do that exploration. Maybe work with 4 or 5 different sectors, different companies, and see कि क्या मजा आ रहा है. So then maybe the next stint could be somewhere or something in that spectrum. But now my entire perspective towards freelancing is very different. Now 10 years later, having gained so much experience to work so much, I feel like now I have a certain level of expertise. And I know that I can do a lot of value creation for people who I'm working with. So I feel like वहाँ पे जहाँ पहले मेरा ये था कि अरे let's do this तो extra pocket money आएगी. That was I'm just telling you in very honest and very candid terms, like I'm talking to a friend, but like that was the perspective then. But up perspective ये है कि hey, if I'm working with them, what is the value that I can create for this brand, or how can they leverage my skill set or my network or my experience and get the best result for their brand, because that is a success story for me. The money, of course, is a motivator, but the money is not the primary motivator. Now the motivator is ki, how cool will this look on my portfolio? Like how amazing will this sound when I tell people that, hey, I created this brand, or this campaign was mine, or whatever. So that, so then that becomes a motivating factor for you. And I think now when I go out freelancing, for me, the interesting thing is ki, yes, let's get a taste of everything. Let's do this also. Let's do that also. Have the flexibility to choose what you want to do, at what time, in what industries, with what people. All that becomes very important, like who you're working with and what you're doing and stuff. But yeah, what's the value creation and how cool will this look? And that gives you a little bit of a high also. So yeah, that I think that is the thing. The transition was never difficult the first time also. The transition is not difficult now also, because by virtue of having worked for so many years, you already know so many people, and you do a little bit of preparation before you do that transition, right?
What kind of preparation?
Okay, so it's not cold turkey. ऐसा नहीं कि आज नौकरी छोड़ दी और कल से पता नहीं है कि तुम क्या करने वाले हो.
Okay.
Even before you've decided to, let's say for someone not like me, but let's say for someone who's actually looking to transition from a full-time job to something part-time, even 6 months before you think of losing the job or moving away from the job, you've started preparing कि हाँ चलो मुझे क्या करना है. Do I want to go work in another place? Do I want to freelance? Okay, I want to freelance. I've made that like salient decision without telling anyone, but I've made that decision in my mind. The next step that I take is I'd start building connects. I'll start speaking to people. I'll maybe speak to some of my older colleagues, some of the older people that I've worked with. And I'll start creating a soft pipeline of people that I can work with. Because this happened with me in my previous job. I had a lot of people asking me that, hey, can you help with this project? And at that point of time, because it was a conflict of interest with my full-time job, I couldn't take it up. But there are people who come and ask you, right? And someone who's seriously looking to transition, not aise nahi ki chalo figure out karte hain, let's leave my job and figure out, no. But if you're seriously looking to transition into a freelance consulting kind of format, you have to start the groundwork at least 6 months before you are seriously considering to quit your job, because you lose a lot of things. You lose that security of having an income hit your bank every, the last day of every month. You lose that security. So I think as a sensible individual, I think you need to do that little bit of groundwork, create a pipeline of leads or clients or people that want to work with you. And then you say, ki, haan, chalo, now I'm going to... And also, I think it also helps sometimes to overlap the two things if you can, without a conflict of interest arising, where you pick up some freelance projects and do them in your spare time, maybe over the weekends or post-working hours. and see how those are, whether you're actually cut out for something like this. Can you multitask? Because in our own fantasy worlds, we सबको लगता है कि हम Superman हैं, हम कर
we can
लेंगे,
do
you know, we can do it. But actually, when reality hits you, you realize कि नहीं हो पा रहा है भाई. Because in the office, you have this thing, the security ना कि आज नहीं हुआ तो कल हो जाएगा. Nobody's going to fire you over a delay of a week or 2 weeks if you're able to justify it well, right? So you have that security blanket, but you don't have that in a freelance sort of setup, because you have a certain deliverable, you have to deliver it. You'll only get paid once those deliverables hit the company email account or whatever, however it is that you need to, and then only you will get paid for it. So it's not for everyone. I feel you need to be mentally prepared for those kind of things कि भाई ये सारी अड़चनें आएंगी. How do I tackle it? And हाँ, एक दूसरी चीज़ है, always never end things with people on a bad note.
Correct.
That's one thing that I've realized. I think if you want to, in the future, if you want to become an entrepreneur or a consultant or someone who wants to work as a freelancer, जहाँ भी नौकरी कर रहे हो ना, like always end things on a good term with people, because the world is very small. I have realized when I go out and network, I always meet someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows me. So it's a very small world, and you don't know where people are getting their informal references about you from. And what if somebody goes meet somebody at such an event and somebody says something bad about me?
Correct.
Why leave room for that kind of dirt? Just ensure that you have amicable working relations wherever you are, even if things are not great, but just part ways on a good note, so that you can always go back to them on a later date to ask for work. Or you can always go back to them on a later date to ask for references. So वो सारी चीज़ें I think बहुत ज़रूरत है. So if you are looking to do that transition, I think you need to be mindful. Everybody has a different process. Mine was different. People have a different process, but be mindful of a few things. Figure out these things. Yeah.
So a lot of what you mentioned focuses on word of mouth and networking.
Yes.
Did you ever think about social media? Should I build my LinkedIn profile? Should I become a thought leader on, say, social media platforms, be it Instagram or LinkedIn? Was that ever a thought for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is very important, and thanks for bringing that up also. I think one of the best ways these days to get noticed or get picked as a freelancer is to build a lot of content on social media. Also, there storytelling comes into the picture, So there is your what, how, and why. तो किसी भी brand का ना, we always do this कि what is the reason for your existence? That's why do you exist in this world? And I think you need to also retrospect and kind of do that, introspect and do that for your own self as a brand. कि what do I stand for? कि मेरा core value system क्या है? What is it that I am putting out in the world, and what is the value that you can derive if you associate it with me? If these are the three things, if you're able to communicate this effectively through social media or LinkedIn, I think it's very nice. वो आप कैसे करोगे? Put out a lot of articles. Like let's say I'm a brand strategist. I will keep writing about brand strategy, or I will look at what's happening currently in the world and maybe put a comment on that, hey, look, this ad just came out recently. Here are my 2 cents. Or this brand just did this recently. Here are my 2 cents. Engage with people on social media also. So there is this rule which I recently discovered, apparently. You need to post content twice a week on LinkedIn, and you need to engage on LinkedIn for 90 minutes every day. I don't know if this is true, but I mean, I'm hearing this a lot of late.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm hearing this a lot of late. I think if you follow these things thoda bahut consistently, rigorously, also you need to be very focused. ऐसा नहीं है कि, you write about anything and everything under the sun. Then you don't really stand for anything, and nobody can really figure out कि, okay, मुझे इस बंदे या इस बंदी से मिलेगा क्या if I'm associated with them. So talk about that one thing, talk about it consistently, and talk about it with discipline. So look at an Ankur Warikoo, I just love his content. You can love him or you can hate him, but you can't ignore him. And जो वो पहला comment डाल के वो pin करता है ना, now my book Make Epic Money is available on Amazon, like fabulous, because you just can't ignore that guy. You can't not come across his content at least once every day on LinkedIn, and that's what it is. It's all about visibility, frequency, and consistency, right?
Yeah.
And obviously that harping that one thing कि भाई ये है, ये मैं हूँ, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do, just that.
Yeah, and
But that's true for freelancers and people in the industry.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. That's actually agnostic of whether you're an independent worker, gig worker, or if you're a full-time worker. You should do that irrespective.
Okay, and okay, this is something that I've heard from other independents I've spoken to. A lot of them are very uncomfortable putting themselves out on LinkedIn, be through images, be through sharing thought leadership. They're like, first of all, I don't have the kind of time to say create a schedule, post 2 times a week, engage with someone 90 minutes a day, if that's the strategy they're focusing on. First of all, they're like, I don't have the time. Second, I'm not comfortable putting myself out there on LinkedIn. My network is looking at me. Probably this is not how I want to present myself. So there are a lot of apprehension among independents about putting themselves out there on LinkedIn. What do you have to say to people who are uncomfortable in the first place?
So figure out why that discomfort is there. If that discomfort is because you don't want to you don't want to come across as show-offy, or you don't want to come across as gimmicky, then write about stuff which is only subject matter related. Like, I do a lot of personal posting also on LinkedIn. If I'm attending events, or let's say I'm doing this podcast, I would love to talk about it, why not? But there are some people who will be like, no, I don't want to, why should I promote myself? And people are a little apprehensive because as a society, I feel, we've always been taught to underplay our achievements rather than boasting about it. If you go to the US or Europe, वो 5 रुपए का काम करेंगे, but ऐसे दिखाएंगे कि 500 रुपए की चीज की है, But यहाँ पे हम इतनी बड़ी चीज करते हैं, but we are so embarrassed to talk about it and take credit. It's sad. But I think the way that they can address that or change that is, first of all, don't be embarrassed. Because when you're going out and pitching yourself for business also, that's exactly what you're doing. You're putting yourself out for judgment. So there's no harm doing it on LinkedIn, because at least here you can control the narrative, right? In the real world, you can't even control the narrative.
Yes.
If you're relying on people to do word of mouth for you every time, and if you're relying on your work to speak for you every time, you don't know. Sometimes the work may just not be that good, or it may backfire, or people may say bad stuff about it out of jealousy or some other reason. You don't know. You can't control those environmental factors. But what you can control is your LinkedIn profile. You can post exactly what you want to say. If you are not very confident with writing that content, there are so many AI tools. Up to LinkedIn mein khud ka ek AI bot aa gaya hai. Use that. There's so much. There are so many interesting tools for creators now. Yeah,
that's true.
That you can use to your advantage. And actually, there are so many ways to just. So I'm using a couple of tools now where I just schedule stuff and I keep it for like the next 2 or 3 weeks. So unless something drastically changes, we maintain that schedule.
Okay.
And the post goes live when it has to.
So do you consciously sit and make a strategy for LinkedIn, or are you?
Yeah, you have to.
Because when you're attending events, that becomes an ad hoc post on LinkedIn.
That becomes an ad hoc post. Yeah. But that becomes an ad hoc post. So let's say something, जब कोई crisis हो गया इस दुनिया में and you want to talk about it, of course that. Or if I've had a bad experience with a brand and I want to talk about it, of course. But in general, you need to have a strategy. No, you can't just rely on the world conspiring or the universe conspiring for you to become like one shining star. That's not going to happen.
True.
So you have to build your own strategy. At least you need to know कि अगले 2 हफ्ते में मैं क्या बोलने वाली हूँ.
Correct. Yeah.
उतना तो foresight I think होना चाहिए. I'm not saying 3 months, 6 months, but 2 weeks is I think you can manage.
Okay. And why do you think companies with robust internal marketing teams are looking for external freelance talent or independent talent?
Okay, so that is a very interesting question. I think when you have a team and that's been working on your brand for 6 months to a year or even longer, then I think a certain fatigue sets in. So then their creatives, their copy, what they're putting on social media starts to look a little repetitive and maybe after a point a little boring also. There are creative blocks that come in. So I think bringing somebody fresh and somebody from the outside gives you a fresh perspective. I feel sometimes आप कोई campaign कर रहे हो, उसके लिए आप किसी freelancer को engage कर लो. अभी तो actually off late I'm seeing a trend of a lot of brand audits also happening. Because there are lots of brands that are moving into an omni-channel sort of format where they're offline, online. And they have a lot of different touch points for customers, which could be online, offline, app, website, store, whatever, different touch points. Their own salespeople, their inside sales teams. But the brand is not consistent across those different channels. And because different teams work in silos, they don't have visibility on what the other team is doing or what the customer experience is is actually across those different touch points. Right?
So when you talk about consistency, are you talking about the tone of voice, the brand
Tone
imaging?
of voice, the visual consistency, the language consistency, basic things like how are you addressing. So for example, if a brand projects, this is Zomato, if they project a tone of being friendly, quirky, but if their customer experience team, when you call their call center and they talk to you rudely, that's not consistent with the theme, right? Or let's say they say 30 minutes, if your order doesn't come, you get a cash back. But on the app, that is not communicated properly. Or let's say on their website, it's not communicated properly. Or when the delivery boy actually comes to your location, he's not aware, he's not been trained in that particular thing. So the overall customer experience becomes very broken.
Correct.
For the final customer, right? And then they're going to go, and irrespective of how great the food is and that the delivery was actually made in say 25 minutes, they may still go and write something nasty about you on social media. And अब तो मतलब लोग अच्छा नहीं लिखते हैं, मतलब 100% कुछ होता है ना, so people will not go and write about it. But you know, even if they're a little unhappy, they'll go and like blast you on social media. People have just become very mean. So yeah, so I think to control all of that, it's important. So brand audits के बहुत I'm seeing a lot of people looking for brand auditors, freelance brand auditors, campaign creators, and also I feel कि internally I don't think we really get the bandwidth to think fresh, because हम इतना bog down हो जाते हैं ना कि 8 घंटे में हमें 4 पोस्ट बनाने हैं, फिर 5 ये करने हैं. So you become so tied down and mechanical, and it becomes so robotic, the whole process, that I don't think you're able to bring anything fresh to the table. Not because you're not creative, but because the system or the framework is just not giving you the time or the bandwidth to do it. So I think that's why people are engaging with freelancers, and it's honestly a win-win, because imagine a company had to hire somebody with a 18-20 year experience, जिसको इंडस्ट्री का बहुत डीप नॉलेज है और बहुत सब कुछ पता है. But small startups are not able to afford those kind of salaries or that kind of comp. They may not be able to. I'm not saying they're not able to in general, but they may not be, because they might be looking to remain frugal in the first few years of their operations or whatever. So this becomes very interesting, no? Because you bring somebody on board part-time, so you don't have to bear their entire comp of which might be like a 70 lakh, 80 lakh to a crore or whatever. So you're paying them a much smaller amount, which is affordable for you, but you're getting the skill, the expertise, the guidance, and they're able to guide your team is able to execute that. So it's a win-win for everyone. Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah, correct. And in terms of the trends and the kind of projects you've seen, you've mentioned brand audits, that's one. What other trends have you seen that seasoned marketers can expect when they decide to go independent?
Okay. Yeah, it completely depends on your skill set. Okay. So there is no correlation between your skill set and the trends which are currently prevalent. Those trends may change in 3 years. You may not even be relevant. Your skill set may not even be relevant after 3 years if you're becoming a freelancer. So there are two things. When you're looking to freelance, I think one of the other things you need to do when you're doing the groundwork is figure out कि market में जो है requirement, are you already able to cater to 60-70% of that in terms of your functional skills, your leadership skills, or whatever skills you have?
Can you give an example about
this? जैसे अब brand audit है या creative campaign creation है, ठीक है? Have you done that successfully in the past? Can you cater to these projects if you were awarded these projects? It's not, you can go and pitch and whatever, but your portfolio or your resume also needs to reflect successful completion of certain XYZ projects or deliverables, or you need to show that you've done this in the past, right? So figure out if there's an overlap between what you can do and between what people are asking for in the market. When there is a natural overlap, and the overlap doesn't have to be 100%, even if it's a 50-60% overlap, you are okay. Because you know कि मेरे पास जो सामान है उसकी मार्केट में डिमांड है. It's basic business common sense. That 20-30% which is lacking, can you either A, bring a partner on board, so you can collaboratively do these projects where the skills which are lacking in you can be fulfilled by this person. Similarly, the skills lacking in this person can be picked up by you. And then you can collaboratively go pitch for projects. That's the second way of approaching this. The third way of approaching it is, can you do some upskilling programs or workshops to fill up those gaps which are lacking in you? Like suppose आपको AI कैसे use करते हैं नहीं पता, because it's a relatively new thing and a lot of people are still kind of figuring out how it works. And so why don't you do a couple of certifications? There are so many online certifications. Let's say something in digital marketing. If you don't have a very thorough knowledge, go and do a little small program, do a Coursera or an upgrad program. और सोशल मीडिया में या फिर इन्फ्लुएंसर मार्केटिंग अगर आपको नहीं समझ में आता तो go and speak to people who've done it so that you get some masala to work around, and then at the same time also go and do a small course on how social media marketing, influencer marketing works. How do you track the KPIs? How do you look at analytics? How do you read that data? It's very easy, no? It's not rocket science. What you don't know, either you will go and find out on your own or you'll find somebody who can do it for you. यही दो तरीके.
But then how do you actually gauge whether there's demand for the skill you have? Is it through LinkedIn? Is it through peer-to-peer conversations? How do you actually do it?
Multiple channels. There's LinkedIn, there's peer-to-peer conversations. There are platforms such as yours, like Outsized, where there are so many platforms like yours, where people can actually go figure out ki kya in demand hai. So you can make you get a collective understanding of across the industry and across different platforms and across different channels, what are people seeking? What kind of expertise are people seeking? And also you'll get an idea of how much are people willing to pay for that expertise, because if you're doing 3 or 4 projects, but if you're not making 20-30% more than what you were making a year back, so fir pointless hai.
Okay.
If your full-time job is giving you 100 rupees, but if you're freelancing and diversifying and picking up multiple projects, at least you should be making 120, 130, 150, right?
Yeah.
Instead of 100. Because then it doesn't make sense, because the effort is so much, but then you're still making the same amount of money because you're tackling 4 people, you're dealing with 4 teams, you're probably spending so much more time in managing all of this work, right? At the cost of maybe personal time or family time or other things which you could have done. There's so much opportunity, notional, but opportunity cost attached to it, right? So you have to figure all these things out. I'm not saying that day 0 pe sabko pata hota hai. Okay, it's a learning process. Once you start doing it in 3 months, 6 months, you'll understand, let's say 10 out of these 50 things. Then after another 3 months, you'll realize, oh, those 3 things which I understood last month were totally rubbish. I need to relearn. And these are the 5 new things that I have. So there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of unlearning that happens in the process. But I think you need to be prepared for that. And I think you need to be very open, because it's not... Some people also get very attached to their own identities and their own ideas, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to keep going with this only, even though I'm getting rejected again and again. So if you're going ahead and saying that, hey, I want to do this creative writing workshop for your team, but you've gone to 5 or 6 or 10 people and they're not okay with the framework or the content, then maybe rework. Now, maybe there's something wrong in what you're offering. Maybe they're not seeing enough value. Maybe take feedback from them. How can I make this more valuable?
Yeah.
What would have made you say yes? And then rework.
Related to this, I actually want to come back to the point you mentioned as to how founders of startups, they know a lot about the very many aspects of the different things that are needed to run a business.
Yeah.
But they don't really pay attention to, say, branding or storytelling. Say, for example, today you're going to startups and you're telling, I'm an accomplished storyteller. I'd love to uplift your brand through storytelling. And you've gone to, say, multiple people and they've said no. How do you then make changes without losing your own identity as a storyteller?
Okay. So when you go to somebody and talk about branding is a very intangible thing. You can't put a number to it, right? So you essentially have to understand what their expectations are. You can't say, hey, I'm going to come and I'm going to make your brand cool. No. You have to understand. When I go to the table, when I'm speaking to them, I will ask them, okay, what is your vision for your brand? What is your expectation and how do you want people to perceive your brand, right? So it's always an exploratory process when you're pitching for a branding or a creative strategy sort of project. You don't go to them with a solution. You derive the solution from the conversations that you have with the founder, the conversations you have with the employees, the conversations you have with actually some of their customers also sometimes, right? Because we don't know ना, यहाँ पे शायद इस तरफ सबको लगता है कि हम 10 out of 10 है, but when you go to the customer side, the customer is like, no, they're just a 6 on 10, you know. So you need to understand where that gap is and how can you address that with communication and how can you address that with brand communication strategy changes in the way you're training your staff or the way your staff is conducting themselves with the final consumers, the overall experience of the brand. So all of these things are interlinked. For the longest times, these things were working in silos, and that was creating a broken consumer experience. But now, because the consumers have a much larger, stronger voice because of social media and so many platforms, I think brands have started to understand that they need to balance all of these things so that the final experience is not broken for the consumer.
Okay, understood. Now I have a twofold question for you. When you decide to transition to freelancing, there are multiple resources out there that talk about how do you get into freelancing, what kind of safety net you need to have, how do you secure your first client. There are a lot of resources out there. Were they helpful to you? And if not, what steps can one realistically take to secure their first client?
Okay. To secure their first client?
Yes.
I'll tell you in my experience what had happened. So, like I told you, be mindful of your relationship with people and then invest a little bit in nurturing those relationships. Especially with people who are in positions where they are decision makers or needle movers in any company. बहुत important है. Because they can easily open doors for you. And people are transition. So the churn and the transition in jobs now, पहले लोग retire होते थे जहाँ पे join करते थे. अब वैसा नहीं है ना. People are switching jobs every 4 years, 5 years. So you never know कि where this person will be in 4 years, 5 years, and how you can leverage this network, this connect. So I think एक तो not just networking and meeting new people वो तो है ही, but also nurture the connects that are already and nurture them मतलब really nurture them. You know,
without being
selfish and without being कि like मैं आज इसको ये दूंगा तो ये मुझे क्या देगा, not
quid
like
pro
that.
quo नहीं करना.
No quid pro quo, correct. So let it be very genuine, because when it's genuine, the other person will also receive it like that. But it's a quid pro quo, फिर उसको भी समझ में आएगा. You know, next time they may not even respond. So nurture those relationships, number one. The other thing, see from a financial point of view, आई थिंक 2 चीज़ें करनी चाहिए आपको, बिकॉज जब आप फ्रीलांस में ट्रांजिशन करोगे ना, ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको पहले दिन से पैसे आने लगेंगे और द मनी विल स्टार्ट हिटिंग, बिकॉज यू विल डू अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ pitching and projects will take some time to close, materialize, and payments will only start hitting you maybe in 3 months, 6 months. You don't know that horizon could be anything. So I think it's also smart if you are able to create some kind of a personal runway. Either through savings or investments or having some kind of passive income, which could be through, I don't know, rent or whatever. Like a lot of people are now investing in real estate and stuff. So I think if you have sorted those few things, उससे क्या होता है, because if you have money in your account, so you can be a little at peace because your basic existence and survival is taken care of. Your kids' fees can go on time, your घर का EMI can go on time, all those things are taken care of. And then you can actually focus or be fully present in your freelance endeavors. Okay. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll do it for 3 months, 6 months, and you realize shit, पैसे खत्म हो गए. There are too many responsibilities. बच्चे का fees भरना है, ये करना है. Then you'll again start looking for, you know, to come back into a job. Yeah. So, and I've seen that happen with a few people also in my own personal network. So while each one to his own, I feel कि अगर you really want to succeed, तो you have to kind of prepare for it. एक personal runway आप create कर लो, या फिर कोई passive income के 3-4 streams आप create कर लो, या फिर आपका बहुत ही solid घर पे support system होना चाहिए that if you're not working or if you're not earning for a year, somebody else is picking up the slack for you over there. Okay. You know? Like a partner or maybe a family member or a kid or whatever, whoever it is, depends on what stage of life you're in. I think that's very, very critical. The third thing that's very important is be visible. Like I was telling you, whether it is on LinkedIn, social media, try and attend as many networking events as possible. Now there are so many free and very interesting networking events that are happening across the city. Like I go and attend like 2 to 3 networking events a month.
How do you find these networking events?
There are so many platforms. that are hosting events for people from the startup ecosystem or from people in for people in marketing. So there are many subcultures that exist on LinkedIn and across social media. So those subcultures could be women in leadership. So, okay, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's something I want to speak to women in leadership. There will be marketers. Okay, marketers overall, then marketers in startups. So then you become a part of that ecosystem. Then there are CXOs in startups, so you become a part of that ecosystem. Then there are tech startups, so you become a part of that ecosystem. So anything and everything that you've done in the past, वो किसी ना किसी जगह किसी ना किसी Venn diagram में जाके fit हो जाएगा.
Correct.
So figure out what those subcultures or those ecosystems are, and sign up. And there are lots of platforms. Off the top of my head, there's something known as Leap Club for women.
For women.
Yeah, which is very interesting. I've attended only 1 or 2 events of theirs, but very interesting. There are a couple of platforms like CleverTab, MoEngage, these tech, SAP, and even Salesforce. So a lot of these platforms and a lot of these organizations, they do a lot of networking and a lot of business events for clients or for people who might want to use their solutions. So use these platforms to go meet people, understand what's happening in the industry. So it not only do you meet people, but आपको समझ में आता है कि सब कर क्या रहे हैं, what is happening in general and what is it that you can learn from here.
Yeah.
Because आपकी bandwidth इतनी है, आपके पास दिन में 5 ही घंटे 6 ही घंटे, and then 6 hours you can only reach out to, let's say, 20 people and speak to 3 people a day, right? That's all you can manage. But if you go somewhere where there are 200 people brought in by somebody else, you can at least, in 2 or 3 hours, you can at least exchange cards with or numbers with 60, 70, 80 people. Then how you leverage those connects is completely your call.
Yeah.
Or your talent. But at least you're getting that platform. No?
So I was speaking about securing someone's first client. You're an accomplished storyteller. How do you use storytelling to differentiate your services?
Okay, I think we spoke about this extensively when we were referring to Zomato and a couple of other things, a couple of other brands. But see, you differentiate yourself. I'll tell you one thing. So this is very scientific and it's very basic, okay? So if you see, there are lots of psychological studies, और हमको बचपन से ही fairy tales और stories और ये सब सुनाते हैं, right? When you convey something to someone in the form of a story or a narrative, there are lots of neurons that get fired in your brain, and then there are lots of neural connections and pathways that get formed, and your brain automatically retains that information in a much better manner. It's very easy to remember stories. It's very difficult to remember data. So if you remember, हमको school में भी when they used to teach us planets, they used to say, my very educated mother just taught me about the 9 planets. Yeah. So those kind of things, it's scientifically proven that works. Okay. Now, if you pick up that science and you fit that into a marketing sort of framework, that's exactly what it is. You're talking about your brand, but in the context of how well would this fit in your life? And look, this is what this brand is doing. And look, this is what we stand for. Zomato is a cool, friendly person. We'll always give you food when you need it. When you're hungry, mummy ko yaad mat karo, Zomato ko yaad karo, So when you build those kind of connections with people will automatically remember you, right? Sabse pehle you will go and you will search for Zomato. I have 3 or 4 food delivery apps, but I always it's always Zomato that I open, right? Also because I think they're superior, their service is far superior than the others, but also because, they're just there. Like in my brand, the top of mind recall is always Zomato.
Yeah.
And that's the same for any brand, जैसे IPL का भी, the music when you listen to it, wherever you will know this is IPL. You don't even. I'm not even such an avid IPL watcher, but I know because there's that story around it, right? वो IPL का जो होता है ना पूरा that spirit of sportsmanship, competitiveness. You might be on the same team when you're playing for the country, but IPL में सब एक दूसरे के against हो जाते हैं and stuff. So it's that. So storytelling differentiates a brand because it creates a very, very strong connect, which cannot be tangibly defined in numbers, right? So Zomato and probably Swiggy, maybe Swiggy is doing much better. I think they're much better in terms of valuation and revenue and all. I think I was seeing some comparison on LinkedIn recently. But I don't know. I mean, for some people, it's just that they resonate more with Zomato.
Yeah, that's true. And does storytelling help you as an independent build a unique value proposition?
Absolutely. I was giving Ankur's example.
Yeah.
No? How much he talks about his past, his father, the way he sacrificed, whatever. He made all those sacrifices to raise money for his education. He didn't finish the education. He dropped and came back. He speaks about the changes in his life that happened. Some were planned, some were unplanned.
Yeah.
But how he rose to the challenge each time and he did something and created a stronger, better future. And he also says that agar main kar sakta hu, to koi bhi kar sakta hai. And that's why people resonate with him. So he runs these master classes and they have sign-ups in the lakhs. Like they've actually run that program they've had so many sign-ups and so many people are going gaga about the program, or people are buying his books and they're getting reprinted again and again because people resonate with his story, right?
Correct.
And if he was just some other guy who was coming and publishing a book, कितने लोग book publish करते हैं? There's so many people who are publishing, right? But not everybody sees that kind of, or a Sarthak Ahuja for that matter. So he's a CA and he is an influencer on LinkedIn and Instagram, and he talks about very interesting business concepts and business ideas, right? So they're the stories that this guy, he's worked across the spectrum, he knows it all. And he's coming here and sharing these interesting nuggets of information with you. And you resonate with that because, this guy doesn't have an agenda. He just wants to share. And he just wants to talk about stuff that's going on. And it's relevant to me because, it educates me every day. So I'll go and watch that reel or that 1 minute clip that he's posting.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Can you give us one example of how compelling storytelling either impacted a client's decision very well or it helped you win a project?
Okay, so I actually don't have an example of storytelling in my freelance journey, but I have one very critical example of the previous full-time job that I had. So is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I was working for a two-wheeler company, which was in the used two-wheeler space, which is two-wheeler resale. In general, second-hand two-wheelers in India are looked at with a lot of disdain because सबको लगता है कि second hand गाड़ी है कुछ तो problem होगा.
Correct.
A lot of mistrust in that area, and it's a very unorganized sector also. So when I was working with Credar, that's the company that I was working with, and when we went out to the market, there was initially we faced a lot of resistance from customers because these were the notions or the myths that were populating people's minds, and they were true also to a large extent because that's how the industry had operated all these years. But what we were doing was completely different. We were organizing that space. So we had to educate customers that, look, there is trust, there's transparency. We're doing 120 checkpoint inspection. We're doing all of that. And to do that, we created a very interesting brand story around Credar, which spoke about possibilities and million possibilities and how you are moving forward in life when you choose a brand like Credar. Because it is not merely an economic choice. ये नहीं कि पैसे कम है इसलिए second hand bike ले रहा हूँ. But because मैं smart हूँ, मैं ऐसी second hand bike ले रहा हूँ जिसमें inspection हो रखा है, refurbishment भी हो रखा है, इसमें insurance भी मिलता है, इसमें warranty भी मिलती है. You get everything that you would get in a first hand bike, but you're getting it at a much lesser price. And that money which you're saving is allowing you to do so much more. And that vehicle which is giving you mobility is allowing you to move ahead because you may either be using it to commute to work, and that allows you to get to work early or allows you to in general get to work, or drop your kid to school, or lets your wife go to the market. It gives her that freedom of mobility. So that completely changed the perception over a period of time in the consumer's mind. Now, if you go and look at any of Credar's ratings, they're all in the range of 4.5, 4.7, 4.8. Why? Because slowly we built that story. It took time, obviously, because of the nature of the industry, but we built that story. We got consumers to come on the platform. We got consumers to transact. And then now it's the customers who actually talk about the brand, which brings more consumers to the brand. So it's all cyclical, right? So a good story not only brings you that first set of early adopters, but it also brings you the next set of people and the next set of people and the next set of people by virtue of how well you're servicing your customers also. So there also your story and your brand consistency and all of that comes into play.
Okay. I would like to now wrap up this podcast, and I have
Yeah.
one final question,
Okay.
which is, what is the general advice you would give to someone, say with 3+ years of experience or 5+ years of experience, who are unsure about whether freelancing is for them or not?
So I think 2 or 3 things. A, why don't you speak to people who are already freelancing? Understand how their finances operate, understand how they're hunting for their next client. So sometimes speaking to people also gives you perspective now, because एक external view होता है और एक internal view होता है. So you go in, speak to 10-15 people. It's very easy. Just write to people on LinkedIn, and these days people are very
Receptive.
They're very receptive, and they're very happy to get on a 15-minute call, or just happy to get on a quick video call or a phone call. So reach out to such people. You will message 10 people, at least 3 people will respond. So speak to such people, understand, see if it is in alignment with what you have in mind, because sometimes we tend to glamorize certain
Yes.
थिंग्स इन आर माइंड, बट एक्चुअली वो इतने ग्लैमरस होते नहीं है. तो आप समझ लो कि रियलिटी क्या है. तो वो एक चीज़ है. दूसरा, while you're working, only pick up a couple of freelance projects and see कि whether you're enjoying it or not. Is it too stressful? Is it not enjoyable? Is it paying you enough? The third thing is network and spread the word a little bit. Hey, I'm looking. Are you guys interested in employing my services? So maybe the first few projects that you do, you can do it at below market price, just to get a step in and just to
experience what it's like.
Experience and get 4-5 projects on your portfolio जो दिखा के आप बेच सकते हो कि देखो मैंने ये किया है, तो I can do this. ये मैंने किया है, I can do this. So maybe these few things, and because you're just somebody with 3 or 5 years of experience, I think I'm assuming you will be at an age where you don't have too many monetary responsibilities also, like बच्चे घर और ये सारी चीजें भी नहीं होंगी. So if you are financially a little more independent and there aren't too many people or factors relying on you, then create a personal runway of 6 to 8 months. Give it a shot. Give it a shot wholeheartedly. If in 6 to 8 months it doesn't work, or you feel like nahi ho pa raha hai, then go back to a regular job. If that's where you feel your programming is for a regular job, then do that if you need that security and stuff. Because you're at a 3 to 5 years, you'll easily find something also. It's not going to be very difficult for you to find a full-time job, because wo wale space mein there is a lot of hiring that's constantly happening in different organizations. So don't think too much about it. You're at an age where you can experiment and be a little reckless, if I may put it like that. But do it.
Yeah. On that note, thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really great conversation, especially as someone who's also into marketing and knows more than a few stuff about marketing. This is very interesting, and thank you so much again.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I really enjoyed myself.